We've got two big topics to talk about today regarding Bricks and Minifigs. The first is going to be how they've been hiding their real owner the whole time and how maybe the wrong guy has been taking all the heat. And second, the entire operation has been uncovered. We know more about Bricks and Minifigs today than we did just a few days ago. Thank you guys for subscribing. Now let's dive in.
For months, this Bricks and Minifigs situation, this whole saga, has revolved around one man being Eamon McNeff, the CEO of Bricks and Minifigs. He's literally in almost all of my thumbnails covering this topic. The topic of discussion is almost always surrounding him, and he is always involved with the story somehow. But what if he's not actually the one in charge? What if there's someone above him who has been staying completely out of the spotlight this entire time?
That is interesting because sometimes the CEO is the owner of the company, but in this case, well, that's not the case.
Well, today we're going to be looking at some new reporting that was done through different YouTube videos that suggests exactly that. And before we get into it all, I just want to let you all know the name of this man is Reed Brimhall. But before we get into all of the details, I want to thank the BJC live show and EBN. They both made great videos. Well, I believe BJC did a live stream and she'll probably make a video soon. And then EBN made a great investigative video on this. I'll have the links to both the live stream and the video in the description, as well as all other sources that I use. But with that being said, let's get right into this. First of all, who is this guy I just name dropped, Reed Brimhall? Reed Brimhall has apparently been the chief financial officer of Bricks and Minifigs franchising since June 2016. And that's not just a rumor, it is listed directly on Bricks and Minifigs franchise disclosure document for 2026.
10 years.
It's insane that I somehow missed that. I was like combing through the document for other videos and I somehow miss that Reed Brimhall, this guy, is involved in Bricks and Minifigs a lot, and I've never even heard of his name. But apparently he also owns and operates the Boise, Idaho location, which has been described by people who visited it as a flagship level store. So it's bigger and more impressive than the typical Bricks and Minifigs location.
All right, so he's an owner and an operator, which tells us one thing, that he's not only the owner of the entire company, but he knows what it takes for a day-to-day to run a store because he's a store owner himself. He's got his boots on the ground, or at least he did at one point in time.
And to top it all off, his son, Adam Brimhall, works at Bricks Minifigs Corporate and wrote one of the witness statements to police that has been used against Reckless Ben. So it appears that the Brimhall family has been quietly involved at every level of this company for nearly a decade, and not only involved with the company, but with the whole situation at hand, and we didn't even know his name up until today.
Of course, they're going to want their CEO to take all the heat. They're going to try as hard as they can to hide in the shadows because their big company is being completely crapped on, so they don't want to personally be crapped on as well. But of course, it's gonna rise to the top, and we're going to figure out who they are.
And speaking of that 2026 franchise disclosure document, there's a very interesting detail around it, and I just really wanted to spotlight this. It states that Reed Brimhall has been CFO of, quote, the franchisor and the franchisor's parent since June 2016. So that means he's the CFO of the franchisor, meaning Bricks and Minifigs, and the franchisor's parent, like a parent company. So that means there's an entity above Bricks and Minifigs Franchising Incorporated, and it's something that owns or controls it. But what's really weird is in another section of that document, Bricks and Minifigs states that they have, quote, no parents or predecessors required to be disclosed. So which is it? Does a parent entity exist or not? I don't know, like, this isn't proof of anything crazy or any wrongdoing, but it's just really weird how the franchise disclosure document seemingly contradicts itself in the same document. Like, there is a parent company and there isn't a parent company. So I'm not sure what's happening there. It just adds to this whole Bricks and Minifigs mess that has been rooted in the company's financials and all of their documents throughout this entire saga.
I mean, it could just be legal jargon that sometimes is not very clear and not clear to the average Joe, you and I, but maybe it makes more sense in legal terms in the courts and by the lawyers that put it together.
And moving on, it appears that the public record already supports that this guy, Reed Brimhall, is the CFO of Bricks Minifigs. Because years before this entire scandal happened, Reed Brimhall did an interview with what's described as a profile or portfolio-style online magazine. And in this piece, he told the story of opening the Boise, Idaho store to help give his son opportunity and purpose. But buried in that same article is a direct description of Reed as, quote, part owner and CFO of Bricks and Minifigs franchising. So this is something Reed Brimhall said about himself publicly years ago. Now, to be precise, being part owner does not automatically mean majority owner, and it doesn't tell us anything about how much control he actually has over the company, but it does confirm that some sort of ownership stake beyond the CFO title has been publicly acknowledged for years. And
it's crazy how nowadays you could say something in an interview, in an article, even in a social media post 10 years prior, and that stuff can come bite you in the butt today if you happen to get yourself into some type of trouble, because everything lives forever on the internet.
Involving Reed Brimhall. But the YouTube channel EBN in their video spoke with Teula Marone. I don't know if I pronounced her name correctly, but she's a former Bricks and Minifigs manager who worked directly for Reed Brimhall, and she agreed to speak on the record using her name. And while she did that, she told EBN that Reed represented himself to her directly as the majority shareholder of the company. And in her own words during the interview, she says, "I don't have proof that Reed owns 60%, but he told me he owns more than 60%. He told me himself." So that is a named on the record former employee saying that the CFO personally told her he owns the majority of the company. And then we also have a second source with close ties to Bricks Minifigs corporate who corroborated the same claim to EBN, saying that veteran franchise owners have heard the same thing. But how did Reed respond to this? You know, he was contacted about this whole thing. So before the publishing, EBN did the responsible thing and they reached out to Reed Brimhall directly. And Reed responded and he asked them to send specific questions. So EBN, of course, sent him direct questions about his ownership percentage, whether he has voting control, and what exactly the parent entity referenced in the FDD actually is.
I mean, so far, all we're hearing is that there was actually an owner that wasn't the CEO of the company that we've been talking about the entire time, that there's someone above it who's been pretty quiet and everything, probably because he doesn't want his name publicly brought into the public eye. I'm sure that's going to affect his personal store in a negative way, as well as his entire franchise being hurt in a negative way. But besides that, it's not like we've found and uncovered a criminal or someone that was clearly doing something wrong all the time. Although being the owner of the franchise, he did make a lot of decisions that were very questionable that we've been going over throughout the entire playlist.
And Reed replied, "Thanks for sending this. Let me study it a bit and I'll get back to you tomorrow." And as of the video's publication, he never answered any of those questions. Bricks and Minifigs Corporate was also sent a detailed media request on July 9th with a response deadline of July 13th, but Bricks and Minifigs Corporate never responded either. But where this gets more interesting is the leaked screenshots. So apparently, after EBN published their initial coverage of Bricks Minifigs' July 10th blog post, they say that they were provided screenshots appearing to come from an internal Bricks and Minifigs related Slack discussion. And Slack is reportedly the internal communication system that Bricks and Minifigs uses connecting franchise owners up to corporate.
So for those of you that don't know Slack, because it's a very corporate style chat system, I'm in it for multiple games that I cover and multiple companies that I work with for my broadcast company. Essentially, Slack is like a Discord. It's just a different platform that has a lot more securities and a lot more gating and a lot more permissions that you can use so that it keeps everything safe and secure. And it's a great way to have internal communications with companies and other franchisees. For example, the Bricks and Minifigs corporate could have a Slack, and each of their franchisees could have their own thread or section of Slack so they can keep communications with all of their franchisees, and it could all be very safe.
So EBN is careful to say that they can't, independently confirm these screenshots that they represent official Bricks and Minifigs policy or anything, but the screenshots appear to show EBN's media request and coverage being discussed internally. And one message reportedly indicates that questions sent to or about corporate staff were, quote, not expected to receive answers. So if that is accurate, it suggests that the silence from Bricks and Minifigs corporate wasn't an oversight. It may have just been the plan from the start. And speaking of the July 10th Bricks and Minifigs blog post, that was the one where they announced that there were 7 improvements happening in response to Reckless Ben's Part 3.
We covered that.
That entire post was framed around one core message, that trust needs to be rebuilt. But trust requires knowing who actually holds power. If Ammon McNeff isn't the majority owner, and if someone else holds 60% plus of this company and has final say over litigation, board decisions, and franchise policy, then every promise in that blog post might mean something different. And I don't know if franchise owners are aware of Reed Brimhall or not, but if they don't know who the man is and he does hold over 60% of the company, that's kind of odd that they're talking to Ammon thinking that he is, the big boss. He controls the whole company. He has majority over it.
I will say, though, the CEO does really, for the most part, run the company. The CEO is typically a position that is the end all, the person that makes all the big decisions, the person that makes things run. There could be someone that's in ownership above that, but they're typically more of a hands-off type of a person. I guess it depends company to company. In this case, he could be very hands-on and just silent about it and not being the public-facing person, but typically the CEO runs most of the day-to-day.
Now they don't even know the true owner of the company. But just to confirm, here are some things that we do not know. We don't know for certain that Reed Brimhall owns 60% or more of Bricks Minifigs franchising.
Fair.
We don't know if he owns those shares directly or through another entity. We don't know what the parent entity referenced in the FDD actually is. We don't know who has final voting control over major decisions. But what we do know is that a named former employee says he told her directly he owns the majority, and a public magazine article years ago described him as a part owner.
So we also want to dive into what has been unleashed, what we've learned about the company itself. So now we know that there's some ownership behind the scenes that wasn't clear, or actually even wasn't known before. We're still unclear about how much ownership. 60% is what's floating around, but we have another video that we could tune into right here that can give us more details on how the operation was completely run.
4 months, the Bricks and Minifigs controversy looked like it revolved around one man, being Ammon McNeff, of course, the CEO of Bricks and Minifigs. But over the last couple weeks, something much bigger has started coming into focus. There has been a hidden majority owner of Bricks and Minifigs, an unexplained parent company, a mysterious LLC named after the Welsh word for family, and a blood relationship between the CFO and the CEO's own mother, which was never disclosed to a single franchise owner. So this is no longer an isolated incident. This is no longer just like one story. This is a full operation, and tonight I will be showing you all every piece of it that we are currently aware of.
Let's go.
So full credit for all these new findings goes to Echo Base Network, or EBN, for the investigative work behind almost everything in this video. I will, of course, leave a link to their original video and channel in the description below, so make sure you go check them out if you are interested. But with that being said, let's get right into this. So first of all, where did this whole story start? Well, a couple days ago, we dove into Reed Brimhall, Bricks and Minifigs Chief Financial Officer, and he's been in that position since 2016. He is also owner of the Boise, Idaho flagship store. We also went over the fact that in Bricks and Minifigs 2026 FDD, it talks about a parent company of Bricks and Minifigs that they are not required to disclose in that franchise disclosure document. And of course, a parent company means that something exists above Bricks and Minifigs Franchising Incorporated, and that single phrase, the franchisor's parent, is what had the boys over at EBN digging further into this. And what they found next is the reason I am making a video today. The possible parent company of Bricks and Minifigs is called Teula Legosy. So in EBN's special report, they talk about this new company, Teula Legosy LLC, and they have 3 separate sources with direct ties to Bricks Minifigs independently confirming the same thing to EBN, that Teula is the Welsh word for family, and Legosy is a clear play on Lego and legacy. Furthermore, Reed Brimhall is Welsh, so this isn't just some randomly generated LLC name pulled from a business filing service. It reads like the family's Lego legacy, and it seems like it was deliberately chosen. But how is this actually connected to Bricks and Minifigs? Well, Teula Legosy was formed in Idaho back in 2015, and the public Idaho business records tie it to this address, 10150 West Fairview Avenue in Boise, with Reed Brimhall listed as a registered agent.
Makes
sense. The Idaho Business Review reported back in 2015 that Teula Legosy leased over 3,000 square feet at that exact address. Now here's the connection. Bricks and Minifigs' own 2026 FED lists the Boise Bricks and Minifigs location at that exact same address. So the FED describes that location as owned and operated by an entity in which Bricks and Minifigs CFO is an owner. So we have 2 completely independent sources, being Idaho State Business Records and Bricks and Minifigs' own government mandated FED, and they point to the same address and that same man, Reed Brimhall. And I believe this is the same source in the last video. The previous manager at the Boise, Idaho location, Tava Maroney, I don't know how to pronounce that, sorry if I botched that, but she first went on record about Reed's alleged majority ownership of Bricks and Minifigs, and she returned for a second interview with EBN. And in that interview, she confirms directly that Teula Legosy is the company that owned the Boise store, ran its day-to-day operations, and issued her paychecks. So on her paychecks, she can literally see Teula Legosy LLC right on them. So she provided EBN with that actual paycheck that shows it was dated January 2025, listing that same Fairview Avenue address.
Confirmed.
So we have a named source going on the record with a physical financial document. So that's a pretty good piece of evidence we have there to show that all of these different things are seemingly not different, they are connected. We don't have confirmation that this Teula Legosy company is the parent company of Bricks and Minifigs or any ironclad proof, but we do have pretty good evidence to show, at the very least, these different things are connected. The Bricks and Minifigs Idaho location, the Teula Legosy LLC, and Reed Brimhall. So in EBN's video, they give a really good question. You know, if Teula Legosy isn't the parent entity that the FED refers to, then the question is pretty simple. Who is the parent company? You know, we don't have any other companies that even come close to being this connected to Bricks Minifigs that we are currently aware of, other than Legally Mine LLC, but I'm not entirely sure where that company is now or what's going on with it. And this Teula Legosy, you know, family legacy is, you know, pretty suspect. And given that it has the word Lego in it as well, I think it's safe to assume that it is connected to Bricks and Minifigs, especially knowing the connections that Reed Brimhall has to the company and to the Bricks and Minifigs Idaho location. But where it gets crazy is the BJC live show reported something that changes how this entire story should be understood. Evelyn McNeff, the mother of Ammon and Matt McNeff, shares the same grandparents as Reed Brimhall. So that makes Reed and the McNeff brothers second cousins. So every franchise owner who paid up to $300,000 to join this system was possibly never told that the CFO and the CEO's family are blood relatives. So maybe this isn't a story about an outside hidden investor at all. It might be a story about a family-run operation that was never disclosed as one. And of course, EBN contacted Bricks Minifigs corporate, Reed Brimhall, Ammon McNeff, and Matt McNeff for any comments on this development.
No response.
And we have nothing. Of course, radio silence. They did not reply. And this is now the second time EBN has reached out regarding these investigative reports, asking for clarification and asking questions, and have gotten nothing from Bricks Minifigs corporate and Reed Brimhall. So on one hand, you have Bricks Minifigs Minifigs doing things like, oh, I don't know, on July 10th making blog posts saying that they are going to have more empathy, accountability, and transparency moving forward, but we don't even know the structure of their company, of their operation, and how it all works. And the more we uncover, the bigger and more interesting it looks.
I think the biggest thing here is that we're finding out more about this company that seems to be very hidden. Things that maybe even wouldn't need to be hidden. Personally, if I'm a franchisee or a person that's interested in becoming a franchisee, I don't care if some of the family is involved in the upper management or the parent company or any of that. It wouldn't bother me. I don't have a problem with that. But it all being hidden and secret information is what makes everything just seem a little bit more sketchy. So we have an actual owner, we have a parent company, we have family involvement, and it all comes down to Bricks and Minifigs, the decisions that they're making, the claims that they're trying to be more empathetic to people in the community and to people that are dealing with the issues with Bricks and Minifigs, yet they're not responding to emails. The story continues. Thanks for subscribing. To dive deeper into the Bricks and Minifigs story, I have a full playlist for you right here. I'll see you guys over there.